Tonight on Primetime, a US-Iran ceasefire deal cools tensions and reopens the Strait of Hormuz while the world waits to see if it holds and how it will be implemented. So, peace at last, or just the start of a protracted pause? Good evening. Diplomatic efforts are entering a critical phase, with Washington and Tehran preparing for talks that could determine whether a temporary pause in fighting leads to a wider settlement. Well, the discussions come as regional tensions remain high, especially over Lebanon and Israel's role in the conflict.
It brought us, these countries.
US President Donald Trump has defended an interim agreement with Iran, saying Tehran will not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. Speaking on Tuesday on the sidelines of the G7 summit in France, Trump said the still unpublished Memorandum of Understanding was clear on the issue.
The one thing that's happening that's of note, frankly, the only thing that really matters to me, is Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. And it says it loud and clear. They're not going to develop it, they're not going to buy it, they're not going to do anything with it. And if they do, they suffer unbelievable consequences. Not just a little bit like, I won't even tell you the consequences, but the consequences are the ultimate consequences. And with that being said, I hope we have a very good relationship. But the biggest thing is they will not have a nuclear weapon. And that's the reason I got in, and that's the reason I agreed to sign.
Trump also warned that all hell will rain down on Iran if it tried to acquire a nuclear weapon. The agreement is expected to be formally signed in Geneva on Friday, when US and Iranian officials begin 60 days of negotiations on nuclear issues, sanctions relief, and regional security. Vice President J.D. Vance described the memorandum as about a page and a half and very general. He said the document had already been virtually signed by Trump and himself, while Iran's side was signed by Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the talks had been divided into two phases because of the difficulty of reaching an agreement after what he called US and Israeli aggression against Iran.
In the first phase, the most important issue is the announcement of the end of the war, and based on the decision we made, from the morning of Monday, the end of the war was also announced. However, the official commencement of this Memorandum of Understanding will be on Friday. Nevertheless, the announcement of the end of the war took place from Monday morning, and this is perhaps the most important issue contained in this memorandum, the announcement of an immediate and permanent end to the war.
Israel has not directly participated in the US-Iran talks. Trump also said he was not happy with Israel's handling of Lebanon while he was trying to reach a deal with Iran. In one of his first comments on the agreement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he and Trump do not always see eye to eye.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country will not allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. His comments come after the deal was signed between the US and Iran. Here's more.
For decades, I have been fighting Iran's efforts to acquire nuclear weapons. I can define this as my life's mission. I have upheld it until now, and I will uphold it in the future as well. With or without a deal, Iran will not have nuclear weapons, not today and not tomorrow. As long as I am Prime Minister of Israel, this will not happen.
Well, joining us now from London in the UK is the geopolitics analyst, Mr. Al-Abbas Al-Suldani. Mr. Al-Suldani, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Good to have you on Primetime tonight. It's very interesting, this, isn't it? I mean, agreeing something, I guess, is one thing, communicating it. But how easy is the nitty-gritty of implementation of a ceasefire like this?
Well, thank you for the invitation. And as you said, how easy is that? I don't think it is easy at all. We are seeing an agreement, a truce, or a memorandum of understanding that is just no more than a first step to contain, moderate the conflict in the region. This first step needs further developments to address the most critical points. For example, the MOU till now does not guarantee a 100% liberty of Strait of Hormuz. Okay, we don't know for sure what are the terms. The only news we have about the terms are the 14 points, and they are released from an Iranian media, specifically Mahar Press, and they don't explain everything, and the Americans already denied that. However, even the terms, if they been released on the 19th of June, I doubt that the terms will solve every problem. That's why there is a 60 days window. So two files may not be resolved 100% till Friday. The liberty or sovereignty of the Strait of Hormuz and the nuclear enrichment. And these are the most two important files in the agreement. So the agreement so far is just a management for the conflict more than a peaceful 100% resolution for the whole situation in the region.
Okay, not as clear-cut then as it perhaps might seem. I mean, we've heard quite a bit from Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and others in response to the ceasefire. Do you think we could see international powers like France, like the UK, stepping in or trying to step in to some kind of monitoring role over the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, there are 2 points here. The first point is, why didn't they step in the very beginning, and the whole negotiations were led by middle powers? Pakistan, for example, Qatar, Egypt played some role. Oman, they did not do their legacy as they do always, but it played a small role. But at that point, we didn't see these major powers intervene in the negotiations. However, they took a specific stance against the escalation of the region. So the fact that they will intervene at this point is not impossible, but not most likely. This is one. Secondly, literally today, the G7 summit is held. And the G7 summit, you know about its economical appeal and the influence of Strait of Hormuz closes. This will be, of course, the main issue that they will discuss. However, at this point, there are other two factors we need to understand. The G7 members, which I believe they want to de-escalate, they want a resolution, and they want the reopening of Strait of Hormuz. But we need to focus on other powers that the closure of Strait of Hormuz may benefit them, because the whole world relied on their sources. For example, Russia and China. I'm not saying they took advantage 100%, but the whole situation was to some extent in their benefit, the closure of Strait of Hormuz. However, the reopening of Strait of Hormuz at this point, till this point, up to date, is still a bit symbolic. Iran still wants to maintain sovereignty on Strait of Hormuz, because you know, to be sovereign is to be agent. What agency does Iran have apart from controlling Strait of Hormuz, which is the golden card in the Iranians' hand, that they used it professionally, and they changed the whole path of the war. So I believe things are still complicated. The truce, the MOU till so far is a good step, a very good, the ultimate development we have witnessed during the whole 4 last months, but more efforts are still needed.
And when Mr. Netanyahu, like Mr. Trump, insists Iran must never be allowed nuclear weapons, I mean, is that really a meaningful statement? Because, you know, 5-10 years' time, the world will look different. It'll have different economic priorities, different governments, different leaders. I mean, how practical is that statement of never?
Well, you've triggered a very important point here. Netanyahu is literally the elephant in the situation. Israel is the elephant in the situation, is the spoiler in the deal. And number one, how much Trump is able to contain Netanyahu. To be honest, I doubt that he's 100% capable of containing Netanyahu. Secondly, we need to look at a pattern here. The Israelis have gotten a historical moment to expand their influence in the region. Will they give up on this because of Trump's desire or because of the international and domestic pressure on Trump? On Netanyahu, there is not much domestic pressure on this file specifically, but on Trump there is. Thirdly, uh, there is a scenario that may appear even if Netanyahu was constrained from attacking Iran directly. If Netanyahu doesn't attack Iran directly, he may support more regional on-land intervention. So the Syrian lands, Gaza, and even south of Lebanon, although this is a specific situation because the Iranians insist on included in the truce, but the Syrian lands and Gaza may return to the spotlight again. So this is one. Secondly, as you mentioned, and you've mentioned a very important point. So Trump is the president of the United States in his second term, although there are some rumors that he's trying to do a third term, which is merely impossible. But even if he does a third term, for how long, the never will stay a never. This is something very doubtable. The Iranians, although they lost a lot, but they proved that the Iranian regime is not 2000, Iraq 2003, is not Venezuela. Iran is an institutionalized country with 9 or 10 institutions, independent institutions, that every institution of them holds the authority to run and control the, to take actions against enemies, their domestic policy. So, but we only can look term. I believe in the short term future, yeah, Iran will never get nuclear enriched nuclear weapons. However, after that, further developments will happen. And the last, very briefly, the last point is even till this point, we don't know what is the destiny of the enrichment file of Iran. We need another 2015 to negotiations to discuss the enrichment file. The MOU does not trigger or focus on the enrichment file significantly. Okay, Trump says everything all the time. But the outline is very clear. The details are not yet released, and I believe the 60 days will release more details, and we may need even more than the 60 days to come to a mutual ground on the nuclear file.
And finally, if the time frame has question marks around it, what about the enforceability? I mean, how do you go about enforcing a deal like this when there isn't one single entity overseeing it?
Well, the question is it enforceability or is it a volunteer thing? I believe the Iranians are exhausted. They are 100% exhausted. They lost the egos of the elites of their leaders. They lost of their military assets and so on. On the other hand, the U.S. itself, which wasn't affected directly, I mean tangibly, but it was affected indirectly by the international pressure, by the domestic opposition to Trump, by other factors, and economically. So I believe both sides are eager to do it voluntarily. It's not a matter of enforcement. However, the matter of enforcement is linked to Netanyahu at this point and to Iran's proxies, for example, Hezbollah in Iran. Is there a kind of enforceability on over Netanyahu to agree on the ceasefire that Israel is not, to agree on the MOU that Israel is not effectively part of it. I think at this point, the whole world holds the responsibility to contain Netanyahu at this point. I believe Hezbollah can be contained if just the Iranian Supreme leader.
Oh, Mr. Al Saldani, I think we've just lost you there towards the end. We do thank you very much indeed for your analysis and for joining us tonight on Primetime. Okay, after the break, we bring you the latest developments from the G7 summit in France, where leaders are locked in crunch talks over Iran, Ukraine, and growing pressure on Western unity. Don't go away. A very warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. The G7 leaders are closing ranks on Ukraine, agreeing to increase pressure on Russia while maintaining calls for a path to peace in Ukraine. The summit has also broadened its focus to the Middle East, with key regional and international leaders joining discussions in France. Here's more.
Leaders of the Group of Seven gathered for a crucial second day of talks in Evian-les-Bains, France, hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron. The summit focused on two major issues: strengthening support for Ukraine and addressing the crisis in the Middle East. Leaders from Brazil, India, Kenya and South Korea joined discussions alongside the G7 nations and the European Union. A French diplomatic source said G7 leaders agreed during what were described as very productive talks on Ukraine to remain united in their support for Kyiv and increase pressure on Russia. Leaders also agreed to pursue tougher sanctions targeting Russia's oil and gas sectors. US President Donald Trump said Russia should make a peace deal with Ukraine and pledged to do what he could to help end the war.
And we'll see how. I spoke with President Putin on Sunday. And it's sort of the same thing. I mean, they just keep going, fighting, losing soldiers. They lose so many soldiers. This is not since World War II has anything like this happened. I settled 8 wars. This was the one I thought was going to be the easiest settled. There's a lot of dislike between the two leaders.
Trump met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during a working session and later held additional talks with him on the sidelines of the summit. Following the talks with Trump, Zelensky said Ukraine hopes to secure US licenses to produce anti-ballistic air defense systems and missiles.
I raised the topic of licenses. I addressed it to President Trump. We need licenses to produce missiles. We have capabilities different. It's difficult to produce Patriot systems and missiles. Yes, I know. I had a lot of, believe me, I had a lot of meetings and calls with Raytheon, with the company, with their management CEOs, and etc. I know. I'm deeply in this topic, but in any way, we want to increase their production if they will be okay, and if President Trump will support this idea. But now he was positive.
The summit also widened its focus beyond Europe. Macron welcomed the leaders of the United Arab Emirates, Egypt and Qatar for discussions expected to center on the Middle East crisis. Meanwhile, Trump defended a preliminary agreement with Iran, saying it ensures Tehran will never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. He also said he has a strong relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but urged Israel to act more responsibly in Lebanon, adding that he was unhappy with recent actions in Beirut, while efforts continue to reach a broader deal with Iran.
Okay, now let's go to John Kavlich, who is inside the G7 event for us. John, great to see you there. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I mean, you're there. Give us your sense of what you've seen as the clearest signs of agreement and disagreement amongst the leaders.
The most glaring examples of the limitations of the G7 summit so far are 3 communiques: one on Ebola, one on cancer, and one on international cooperation. And all G7 members say that that's important. That's what we've gotten so far. The reality of what comes out of this meeting is it's generally reflecting the lowest common denominator. It's basically settling on whoever wants to do the least, because that's the one you need to satisfy. And in this particular case, that's Donald Trump. So the discussions about Ukraine, President Zelensky has his agenda. The people around President Trump are not too excited about licensing technology because they're afraid of where that technology could end up. So they don't have a lot of confidence in governance in Ukraine because of the corruption. So, we still have, another half, 3/4 day to go. But thus far, there isn't any wow moment.
Yeah. And John, is it actually practically possible for European leaders to apply any pressure on Moscow? I mean, I've lost count of the number of times that President Trump has said, well, I spoke to both of them and they both want a deal, it's coming soon. Has this just been a repeat of that?
Yeah, sort of wash, rinse, dry, repeat. What we've seen, presently is, when the war started, you had Russia and Ukraine, so two parties. Try to stop it, you start with the two parties that are involved. Then the US came around, so now there were three parties. 3 weeks ago, the European Union said, wait a minute, we want a seat at the table. So now you add 27, plus the UK. So now you're at 31 people at the table. If it's been difficult over 5 years to get two of them, Russia and Ukraine, to agree to stop fighting, and including President Trump, how does anyone believe that 31 people in a room are somehow going to make this more efficient and have a clearer and faster outcome? It just isn't going to happen. There are too many agendas. The EU itself doesn't speak as one voice. So even if there's one person representing the EU, who is it? And what is their mandate? And they have to go back and try to convince the other 27. So you having the EU involved and even having the G7 as a group involved, it isn't helpful. The goal is to get fewer people in the room so that Russia has fewer options to try to maneuver around whatever it is they're trying to negotiate.
And John, in terms of other things going on, Ukraine, Moldova opening EU accession talks, how much of a strategic message is Europe trying to sort of send from those discussions?
You have Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. You have Antonio Costa, the president of the European Council, who are here representing the interests of the European Union. And then, of course, you have France and Germany and Italy, who are members of the European Union on their own. And there is a lot of, well, actually, one of the communiques is talking about solidarity, which, of course, is a word that President Trump doesn't like because of its political connotations. The Europeans like it. But they are making the most of saying, we've opened the discussions with Ukraine. They passed 15% of the laws they need to pass. It's going to be a long road, but Ukraine is Europe, Europe is Ukraine. Now, that all sounds good, but there is a consequence to that. The consequence is President Trump listens to that and says, okay, you handle it. This is your problem. There's 3,000 miles of ocean separating us from here. And if Ukraine belongs to Europe and Europe belongs to Ukraine, you want to keep buying stuff from us, that's fine. Ursula von der Leyen today said, well, the war is going to keep going. We're going to need our partners to step up. U.S. taxpayers are not going to be stepping up for anything. So we have this tug and pull, which is European Union, G6, happy about Ukraine becoming a part of the family. For President Trump, he's happy too, but that means like a child living in the parent's house, the child is moving out and the parents have no more responsibility.
John, am I being too cynical here? But I can sense almost like an atmosphere of resignation around the table, an attitude of, look, we all know we can't really affect anything meaningful. We've got one day to go. Let's just try and sort of do what we can. Tell me I'm being too cynical, and actually there is more that is likely to happen tomorrow.
Well, I can't dispute you. I can maybe try to tone it down a little to try to be optimistic, but the reality is there's one moment that everyone wants to prevent, and that is the Trump blow up in public. The Trump blow up in private is one thing. The Trump blow up in public isn't good for any of them. And so they're all doing what they can. We had Chancellor Merz this morning. When the leaders were getting together in the room, he walks over and presents a German football jersey to President Trump with 47 on it, President Trump's 47th president, and his name on it, and then positions Trump so that Trump will hold it up so they can get a camera. I mean, it was a cringe-worthy moment. The sycophantical type of thing that you're trying to placate a child at a dinner table so they won't cry. So you give them something. And that's the major problem is what is President Trump going to do? What's he going to say? And they're all walking on the proverbial eggshells, and therefore the overall outcome of this gathering is by definition going to be lessened because no one wants to trigger him. The problem is no one knows what's going to trigger him. And that makes for declarations like we've seen so far. The first three they release, Ebola, cancer, and international cooperation, solidarity. That sort of gives the message of where we are in terms of doing something really serious and momentous and lasting.
John, we know you're tight for time. We'll let you go. As always, though, we appreciate your analysis very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Guy.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business stories shaping the day with Andy Mioch. Don't go away. Welcome back. You are watching Primetime, and Andy Mioch is here with the business. Andy, what have you got on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, oil has extended losses and reached a 3-month low. The European Parliament greenlit the EU-US trade deal struck last year. Bank of Japan raised interest rates, and there's a couple of stories on acquisitions across industries. So let's have a look. First up, oil prices fell to their lowest level in 3 months as investors continue to await details on the US-Iran agreement to bring the Middle East conflict to an end. The international benchmark Brent futures briefly fell below $80 per barrel.
Brent crude oil fell more than 3% to near $80 per barrel on Tuesday, following a 4.8% decline on Monday, extending losses for a fourth consecutive session and reaching the lowest level since early March. Prices are heading toward their longest losing streak of the year as the expected US-Iran agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz raised expectations of recovering supply flows. An interim deal is expected to be signed in Switzerland on Friday, although both sides have yet to publish the details of the agreement. Despite optimism, uncertainty remains over how the deal will be implemented, including shipping security, operating conditions, and whether Hormuz will reopen fully. The effective closure of the strait has reduced regional exports and contributed to falling global inventories.
The European Parliament has approved cutting tariffs on many US imports to comply with a trade deal struck last year. US President Donald Trump had given the bloc a July 4th deadline to meet its side of the agreement.
The European Parliament approved on Tuesday cutting duties on many US goods imports to fulfill the European Union's side of a trade deal struck last year and avert a fresh round of tariff conflict between the world's largest trading partners. US President Donald Trump struck a deal with the European Union at his Turnberry golf course in Scotland last July. Under the agreement, the EU agreed to remove import duties on US industrial goods and provide preferential access to US farm produce in return for US tariffs of 15% on most EU goods. Almost 11 months after that framework agreement, the EU had yet to pass legislation to implement those duty reductions. Trump threatened to impose much higher tariffs if the EU did not act by July 4th.
Over in Asia, the Bank of Japan raised its benchmark interest rate to 1%, citing challenges stemming from a weak Japanese yen and higher prices. The increase by 0.25 percentage point puts the rate at a 3-decade high.
The Bank of Japan raised interest rates to a 31-year high on Tuesday. It marks another landmark step in normalizing monetary policy as it focused on taming price pressures from the energy shock caused by the Iran war. The hike was the first since December and aligns the Bank of Japan with other central banks shifting towards tighter policy to combat inflation, including the European Central Bank. Deputy Governor Shinichi Uchida acknowledged the recent US-Iranian peace deal as a welcome move, but noted persistent inflationary risks. In a widely expected move, the BOJ decided to raise its short-term policy rate by 25 basis points to 1%, taking borrowing costs to levels unseen since 1995. The bank added that the price outlook warranted attention as companies were seen passing on rising oil costs to each other at a relatively fast pace, which it said could push up consumer prices across a wide range of items. The Nikkei jumped as much as 1% to set a fresh record high above 70,000 after the announcement. The Bank of Japan also decided to pause its bond taper program from April next year and continue to buy roughly $12.5 billion in Japanese government bonds per month.
Still in Japan, technology giant SoftBank Group is launching a service using OpenAI technology to protect against the looming threat of cyber attacks. SoftBank CEO said the company will offer a, quote, patching service targeting the nation's top 3,000 companies behind crucial infrastructure like airports, power systems, and transportation.
Japan's SoftBank Group has launched a cybersecurity product to guard against security breaches exploited through the use of artificial intelligence, the company announced on Tuesday. SoftBank plans to offer its patching-as-a-service product in Japan through the joint venture established last November between its domestic telecommunications arm, SoftBank Corp, and OpenAI. SoftBank founder and chief executive Masayoshi Son said at a presentation to enterprise clients in Tokyo that the company will use OpenAI's cutting-edge tools to defend against such threats. The launch deepens cooperation between the two companies, which have been developing AI system integration services for Japanese businesses. SoftBank Group is one of OpenAI's largest financial backers, with its cumulative committed investment by the end of 2026 standing at $64.6 billion.
Over to Europe's banking sector, Germany has officially rejected UniCredit's offer to buy Commerzbank. The German finance agency cited a low price and concerns about what it called the Italian bank's aggressive approach.
Germany has officially rejected UniCredit's offer to buy Commerzbank. The country's finance agency said on Tuesday this was due to a low price and concerns about what it called the Italian bank's aggressive approach. UniCredit's initial offer period for Commerzbank shares is winding down. Both banks are digging in their heels for control of one of Germany's most important lenders. The German government holds a 12% stake in Commerzbank, acquired in the wake of the 2008 global financial crisis, and has long objected to UniCredit's campaign for a tie-up. It also said that it supported Commerzbank's independence and noted that the bank was an integral player in Frankfurt, the nation's financial hub. Separately, Frankfurt prosecutors confirmed that they had begun a preliminary investigation into possible market manipulation related to the offer. It follows a criminal complaint filed by Commerzbank's Workers' Council that reached prosecutors on Sunday. UniCredit said in a statement that it was aware of the matter and that the prosecutor's response was in line with protocol when such complaints are filed.
And finally, in the restaurant business, Yum Brands announced it's selling Pizza Hut for $2.7 billion. The sale comes after Yum said back in November it was exploring strategic options for the chain.
Yum Brands on Tuesday announced it is selling Pizza Hut, excluding the mainland China business, to private equity firm Long Range Capital for about $1.5 billion. The mainland China Pizza Hut will be purchased by Yum China Holdings Inc. for approximately $1.2 billion, the company said. The sale caps off years of struggles for Pizza Hut, which has weighed on Yum's overall financial performance. In the US, the pizza chain has transitioned from the sit-down format to focus on delivery and carryout. Rival Domino's Pizza has gobbled up market share from Pizza Hut for years. Third-party delivery apps like DoorDash have further stolen sales from the chain. In November, Yum said it was exploring strategic options for Pizza Hut. The deal severs Pizza Hut's decades-long ties to Taco Bell and KFC, its sister brands in Yum's portfolio.
And that'd be all in the business brief for tonight. Handing it back to you, guys.
Andy, thanks very much. Yum Brands, great name for a business, that. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we take a look at the FIFA 2026 World Cup so far, both on and off the pitch, from games to logistics and pricing to shifting global football standards. Don't go away. Welcome back to Primetime. Well, the 2026 FIFA World Cup is already delivering memorable moments, with early results shaping the race for a place in the knockout stages. From dominant performances by tournament favourites to surprising upsets, the competition is providing plenty of drama and talking points for fans around the world. In Group H, Spain and Cabo Verde locked horns despite heavy anticipation. Neither side could break the deadlock. It ended in a scoreless 0-0 draw. The points were also shared in the group's other fixture. Saudi Arabia and Uruguay trading goals to finish in a 1-1 stalemate. In Group G, the story of deadlocks continued. Belgium and Egypt went toe-to-toe, matching each other blow for blow. They walked away with a 1-1 draw. And finally, the highest scoring game of the night took place between Iran and New Zealand. Both teams found the back of the net twice in a dramatic 2-2 finish. Well, after their 2-2 draw, Iran and New Zealand fans reacted to a result that leaves both teams with a point as they head into their next fixtures.
Fans in Los Angeles expressed mixed feelings as they watched Iran World Cup match against New Zealand end in draw on Monday. The match, played at Los Angeles Stadium, ended in a 2-2 draw. Los Angeles is home to the world's largest Iranian diaspora, and before kickoff, about 300 to 500 protesters gathered outside the stadium, waving anti-government signs and flags. Some Iranian Americans said attending the match would imply support for Iran's government.
I was very happy and high, very proud to be Iranian and see this amazing team with everything they've been through. They showed up like that and just brought tears of joy and pride to me. What an honor to be Iranian and witness these amazing, amazing young men that showed up under all the circumstances they were in. So honored to be here.
Proud Iranian fans also said sports should be kept separate from politics and that everyone should support the Iranian team despite the current situation.
I mean, that's what the World Cup is all about, right? Bringing people together and sharing the moments with your fellow countrymen, and or even if you're not from the country, just to support the team. And yeah, so that, that's really what it's all about.
They're going to come and play. Doesn't matter where they're going to be practicing. Doesn't matter what is the political wars going on. They are the professional players. And they live for this moment. They're going to show everybody in the world that doesn't matter what that goes around them, they are here for a reason.
New Zealand fans also showed their support, celebrating their secured a 2-2 draw in their opening World Cup match against Iran.
I had nearly had a heart attack. I thought we were going to win and then lose and then win and then lose, and we drew, which is kind of like a win for us, right? Yeah.
I think a really good opening game for Darren Bazley and the squad, but to lead twice, I think they'll be mildly upset, but equally positive with the first result.
Iran will return to Los Angeles to face Belgium, while New Zealand will take on Egypt in Vancouver in the next Group G matches on Sunday.
Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Katie Wilson to talk about how this World Cup is being shaped, not just by football, but by everything around it. Katie, welcome. Good to have you with us. Yeah, it's almost like this World Cup is being defined more by what's sort of off the field than what's on it.
Yeah, I would say yes and no to that. Like, to some extent, yeah. This obviously hasn't been short of controversial moments. I think it's the first time ever a host nation of the World Cup was at war with one of the competing countries. Yeah. I think that was a first. Obviously, there was all of the issues surrounding the Iranian team in the build-up and during the tournament. And just after that match their manager says they were forced to go back to their base in Mexico immediately. Like, they're not allowed to stay in the US despite playing there in LA. And yeah, obviously there's been the visa issues for several countries. A referee from Somalia was denied entry. That hand gesture from the VAR official was just the latest in a string of controversies. But then you look at it from the other side and there's always something at the World Cup. Last World Cup it was in Qatar, and there was the issue with the LGBT rights in that country and reports that 6,500 workers had died. It'd been building the stadium since it won its World Cup bid. Then before that it was in Russia. Just 4 years before the World Cup, Russia had illegally annexed Crimea. So I think every tournament has had its own controversies. In 2034, the World Cup's going to be held in Saudi Arabia, who's another country that's long been accused of sports washing, that's hosting major sport events to divert public attention away from a poor human rights record. So how we're going to measure the most controversial, or how we're going to measure, what the World Cup is going to be defined by, I think that remains to be seen. Like, now that the games are underway, we are seeing the attention turn towards the football and away from the politics, which is what generally happens. But I think it'll only be at the end of the tournament that we'll really know how to define this year's games.
Now, Katie, you don't get much more controversial than VAR. Everybody's got a passionate view about it. Just go back to that hand gesture. Just explain a bit more about that.
Yes, so a video assistant referee, Sean Evans, he's been cleared after a FIFA investigation after what he says was an involuntary subconscious twitch. It was an okay hand sign gesture, and just to describe it, he could be seen making the fingers of his right hand into an upside down OK sign. And this was, I don't know if you've watched any of the games, when they cut to the shots of the VAR referees at the beginning of the game. So this was before Germany's game against Curacao on Sunday. In a gesture like that, it's got two very distinct meanings. So one harmless, but another connected to an expression of white supremacy. So obviously, this incident was subject to a huge amount of speculation on social media. Evans said that he was unaware of making the hand movement, and he denied intentionally attempting to communicate that sort of message. And FIFA looked into the matter, and it found no evidence of breaches of the FIFA disciplinary code. What they actually did was looked back on the whole match, and they saw him making this gesture quite a few times, so it must just have been a nervous twitch, an involuntary movement. And he has spoken out and said, I understand how the gesture had been interpreted and I regret this. However, I want to be very clear and categorically say that I did not knowingly or deliberately make the hand symbol suggested. And he's actually available for selection for the rest of the tournament. Okay. So I think a Dominic take-up, but obviously not ideal given what's been going on surrounding everything else.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop social media from being awash, I guess, with all sorts of theories. We were talking in the break about just the vast distances that teams are having to travel. How are they coping with those logistics?
Yes, I think that's been an interesting thing, especially over 3 countries, and that different countries have got it's different entry systems, different security norms. I remember they compared once for teams arriving in Mexico, they were met with sombreros, with bands welcoming them. The teams arriving in America were met with security checks on the tarmac. And that was noticed. So I think there is that logistical issue in that they are all handling things differently. So I just want to talk about one of our regional teams, Uzbekistan. So they were subject to lengthy security checks upon arriving in New York. And this was for their pre-World Cup friendly against the Netherlands. And we saw footage, they were getting off the bus, their bags were being unpacked, there were sniffer dog inspections, metal detector screenings on the right on the tarmac as they arrived. Similar for the Senegal national team as well. And footage of this was online, and of course it sparked a lot of controversy. Many were questioning whether the measures were a bit excessive for national delegations that were participating in an international sporting event. You know, they were all accredited, they were all delegations, and actually Uzbekistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs asked for an official explanation from the United States authorities about what that was about. But their manager, Fabio Cannavaro, that's the Fabio Cannavaro World Cup winner, he's since clarified this, and he says actually the procedures were part of standard security protocols in the US, and he says it's actually quite normal for America for that to happen directly on the tarmac. But of course, it has left a bit of taste in the mouths of a lot of people here, in that there is a bit of an expectation when you're hosting a global tournament that you're going to be welcoming people from all over the world, and you need to accept that the competitors are going to come from all 6 continents, and you need to be prepared for that. And for example, Russia, they introduced a visa-free entry system specifically for the FIFA World Cup, but obviously we're not seeing that in America, and people are questioning whether that's going against the spirit of the game, and that's even extending to FIFA officials.
Yeah, it's interesting, Katie, because we've had this. We had, of course, the Somali referee who was turned away. Are people still then talking about and having concerns about access, even potential neutrality?
Well, that's it. So I think it really reached its peak with the case with the Somali referee. So Omar Tan was denied entry to the United States to officiate at the World Cup. He was interrogated for 11 hours by US immigration authorities at Miami airport before being told he wouldn't be allowed into the country. A US government official had said the reason he wasn't allowed was because of an alleged association with the Somali militant group Al-Shabaab. The referee, Artan, says he's got nothing to do with them, and Somalia is one of the countries on a travel ban list introduced by President Trump's administration. So yeah, just that sense of neutrality there people are raising eyebrows about, but Artan believed that he had a valid visa to enter the country. So even though he's not going to take part in the World Cup, FIFA is still committed to paying his salary, and he's since been invited to officiate in the UEFA Super Cup final between Paris Saint-Germain and Aston Villa in Vienna in August. So probably deliberate there from UEFA, and also FIFA is still paying his salary, which I think is telling us something here. But FIFA does appear powerless to intervene, and many commentators have questioned that. It's a FIFA event, he's a FIFA listed referee. Why haven't FIFA been stronger on this? FIFA President Gianni Infantino called for people to chill and relax, his words, over the situation. And he says FIFA can't overrule governments or dictate who can and who can't be allowed in. And he says security goes above everything. You need to respect the decisions. And he says that when he means chill, he doesn't mean chill and do nothing, but to trust FIFA, trust the process, trust the US government and their decisions, and trust that they're trying to find solutions here. But it is unanimous from fans. You know, fans have also struggled with visas and entries, and from commentators, that this just isn't in the spirit of the game or the tournament.
And finally, Katie, just going back to the football, finally, smaller teams or teams that perhaps have done well less often, I suppose, in big tournaments, thinking of teams like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, they seem to be doing pretty well so far in this tournament. Do you think is it too early yet to sort of say that there's almost evidence of the smaller teams closing the gap on the sort of big powers, if you like?
Well, this is, I think, one of the most exciting things in this World Cup. Obviously, this is the expanded tournament. So we've gone from 32 teams to 48, and I think that's allowed these smaller teams who maybe wouldn't have even qualified to come into the World Cup, and it has allowed for those surprises. And we are seeing sort of a general underperformance from European teams and some surprises from Asian and African associations. And I think that typically happens, and that we tend to overestimate Europe, and that we see them more often, and underestimate these Asian teams. So South Korea, for example, beat Czechia. Japan held the Netherlands to a draw, and the Netherlands were the hot favourites there. Egypt held Belgium to a draw. Again, Belgium very much favourites going into that. So there has been opportunities for those countries to surprise. The biggest one was Spain versus Cape Verde. I don't know if you watched that last night, but it was incredible for everyone, I think, unless you were Spanish. The World Cup debutants, Cape Verde, so they're a nation of just over 500,000 people, the size of Sheffield for context. the third smallest country in terms of population to ever qualify for a World Cup. They held the reigning European champions Spain to a goalless draw. It was absolutely incredible. I think even the commentators were struggling to not show they were rooting for Cape Verde here. A 40-year-old goalkeeper, Vozina, was man of the match. And his Instagram following skyrocketed from 50,000 to over 6 million during those 90 minutes. Yeah. But politics is never far away, in that he said afterwards that his mum wasn't able to afford the visa to attend that tournament. So I think politics is always going to be seeping in there. But yeah, I think one thing that is really nice about this World Cup is that we are seeing these teams that we don't normally see, and teams that have been able to surprise us as well. Just a note about what's coming up. We've got France, Senegal at 11 p.m. Baku time tonight. France are the favourites to win the whole tournament, but the almost reigning champions of AFCON, I think, will give them a good game. I don't know if you remember their victory getting overturned back in January. And overnight, we've got Iraq versus Norway at 2 a.m. Haaland will be making his World Cup debut, and Argentina, reigning champions, versus Algeria at 5 a.m. So if you're going to be staying up for it, I think it's going to be a good night.
It's getting exciting. Katie, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, Azerbaijan and the Holy See deepen engagement in Baku with discussions centred on interfaith dialogue and the prospect of a papal visit. Don't go away. Welcome back to Primetime. Azerbaijan and the Holy See are looking to deepen ties with interfaith dialogue and cultural heritage emerging as key areas of cooperation. Well, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev has received George Jacob Kuvakad, prefect of the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue of the Holy See in Baku. They discussed bilateral ties, reciprocal visits, tolerance, multiculturalism and cooperation with the Heydar Aliyev Foundation. Kuvakad conveyed greetings from Pope Leo XIV and Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State. President Aliyev also presented a letter inviting Pope Leo XIV to visit Azerbaijan. I'm delighted to say we're now joined by the political analyst Fuad Karimli to unpack the deepening engagement between Azerbaijan and the Vatican and what it signals for interfaith diplomacy and cultural influence. Fuad, always lovely to have you joining us in the studio. Very interesting this, isn't it? I mean, how would you characterise the current trajectory of Azerbaijan-Holy See relations?
So thank you for having me. I think when we look at the relationship between the Holy See and Azerbaijan, it's much more than just symbolic. So it's progressing into a new phase of institutional and strategic cooperation. So we see an interreligious memorandum of understanding that's being signed. We see reciprocal visits taking place. And this has been going on for the past few years. It had the foundation, but it's intensifying. And we also see practical events of it taking place on the ground as well. So there's a second Catholic church being built in Baku, which is not only needed, but also very symbolic as well, in terms of showing Azerbaijan's commitment to multiculturalism and tolerance.
It's very interesting because, of course, Italy and Azerbaijan have very strong bilateral relations covering a number of different areas. What do you think is driving this clear sort of keenness on the part of the Vatican to do more with Azerbaijan and do more in the South Caucasus?
When we look at the intensification of the commitment between both sides, especially from the Vatican, we see that it does really have a base in terms of what Azerbaijan has been doing with the religious minorities in the country. So it has, the country, Azerbaijan, has always created an era of tolerance in the country since the independence, obviously, but this has also been a historical thing. So it's really a cultural thing where we have this concept of love thy neighbor within the country as well. So it does show that the Vatican appreciates that, and they understand that for the South Caucasus and the wider region expanding into Central Asia, Azerbaijan can act as a good example in terms of promoting tolerance and multiculturalism, especially in such a volatile time in international relations where we see fault lines between religious groups, and this leading to wars and conflicts and then you see the case of Azerbaijan, which does really have that kind of unification between the groups.
I mean, Azerbaijan is widely respected for its diplomatic dexterity, its skill of diplomacy. And it's hard to say precisely the recipe for that, but it feels like part of it is certainly this religious, cultural tolerance, this spirit of cooperation that you mentioned.
Yeah, so we see that diplomacy for Azerbaijan, it's never usually been just about hard power. So soft power has a significant place. This has it through traditional diplomatic channels, but also through interfaith dialogue. And we see that the bridging of interfaith connections in Azerbaijan, so it is a Muslim majority country. It does have different religious groups as minorities. The Catholic population is really minuscule compared to the Muslim groups. However, regardless of the fact, we see that Azerbaijan is really using that in terms of strengthening tolerance within the country, but also exporting that model of tolerance globally as well. So using that in its diplomacy, showing that this is our model and this is what other countries can also replicate in terms of tolerance.
And we obviously saw the invitation from the president to the Pope. How important, how symbolic would a papal visit to Azerbaijan be, do you think?
It would be very symbolic because, first of all, the invitation itself. So it shows that Azerbaijan really does give really high importance to the Pope and the Holy See in itself. But if the Pope were to visit Azerbaijan, we saw that the late Pope, there was a meeting between our president and the late Pope in the Vatican. But if the Pope does visit Azerbaijan, it could act as a significant symbolic step of showing not just legitimacy, but also really understanding and showing that, we, as the Holy See, we really take into consideration what Azerbaijan is doing with its religious minorities, specifically the Catholic groups. And it shows that they really do appreciate it as well.
And do you think that this relationship that is growing, developing, is something that could have positive ripple effects in the wider region, to the South Caucasus, perhaps even to Central Asia?
For sure. When we look at the neighboring groups, neighboring countries, we see that there are a lot of different groups, religious groups within those countries. So there are minorities, other majority groups as well. Towards Central Asia, it's more Muslim majority countries, but there have been, and there still are, different minority groups within those countries in Central Asia. So there's Catholics, Jews, all of these different groups that could potentially benefit. These countries could benefit from looking at the model of Azerbaijan, so what kind of interfaith dialogue it promotes, what it does. And it's not just, I think, at the government level as well. It's something that's really entrenched in the community in Azerbaijan, that you have to respect whoever you're living with, whatever their faith is, whatever their religion is, their lifestyle is. So I think it's kind of like a reflection of the society as well.
Yes.
So the government really does get that support from the community, from the people itself, and your religion is, or whatever it is, it doesn't matter as long as we coexist peacefully. And that could really act as a model for the wider region, to Central Asia, to South Caucasus, and really act as a primary point for other countries when they look at it, specifically in everything that's taking place in the Middle East.
Fahd, it's always great to get your analysis, particularly pleasing when you come into the studio. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. Now, European lawmakers in Strasbourg are preparing to vote on a major trade agreement with the United States. The decision comes as the European Parliament considers wider legislation aimed at easing tensions between the world's two largest economies. From Arnhem in the Netherlands, our correspondent reports.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where lawmakers in Strasbourg will vote on a trade deal with the U.S. aimed at easing tariff tensions between the world's two largest economies. The European Parliament is expected to approve legislation implementing the EU side of the so-called Turnberry Agreement, reached with U.S. President Donald Trump last year at his golf resort in Scotland. The deal was designed to avert an escalating trade conflict that threatened billions of euros in transatlantic commerce. Now, under the agreement, the EU would remove tariffs on a range of American imports, including U.S.-made vehicles and industrial goods. In return, Europe accepted a framework that leaves in place broad U.S. tariffs of 15% on most European exports. Supporters say the deal brings much-needed certainty after years of tariff threats and trade disputes. European manufacturers, particularly automakers, argue stability is preferable to continued confrontation. Critics, however, say the agreement exposes Europe's weaker negotiating position and leaves key disputes unresolved. Brussels and Washington remain divided over issues including industrial subsidies, steel trade, the EU's carbon border tax, and environmental regulations. Temporary tariff suspensions linked to the long-running aircraft subsidy dispute are also due to expire in the coming weeks, raising the risk of renewed tensions. That's why lawmakers stressed during Monday's debate that the agreement includes safeguards and suspension clauses if the U.S. fails to uphold its commitments. The Socialists and Democrats group of the European Parliament made it very clear. It's a temporary agreement with clear conditions, not a blank check for Donald Trump. Today's vote is expected to pass comfortably, but whether the agreement marks a lasting reset in transatlantic trade ties or merely a temporary truce remains to be seen. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
The Islamic Development Bank Group officially kicked off its 2026 annual meetings in Baku today. Top financial leaders from 57 member nations have gathered to drive regional integration and discuss global trends ranging from artificial intelligence to the surging $3 trillion halal economy.
The energy here at the Baku Congress Center is amazing today. The Islamic Development Bank Group has officially kicked off its 2026 annual meetings. It's been 16 years since Baku last hosted this major event back in 2010, and today top ministers and financial leaders from 57 member countries are back here to discuss regional integration for sustainable prosperity. Over the next few days, the schedule is packed with big events, including official board meetings, a fireside chat with the bank's president, a governor's dialogue, and special forums for the private sector. A huge highlight today was the Azerbaijan Halal Business Forum. Speakers stressed that to fully unlock this potential, countries need to work together on shared standards and Islamic finance. Experts from the bank's Excellence Center in Kuala Lumpur backed this up, noting that Muslim consumers spending in this sector will soon clear the $3 trillion mark. To prepare for this future, they officially launched the Global Islamic Economy program here today. On top of that, Azerbaijan is also moving fast on infrastructure. On the sidelines of the meeting, officials met with the leadership of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to talk about new joint projects that will boost Azerbaijan's role as a major transit hub. This global gathering is just getting started, and the event here at the Congress Center will continue until June 19th. And that's all for now. This is Leila Rahimli with Ilkin Mehdiye for A News.
The UK is stepping up pressure on Russia with a new round of sanctions targeting vessels linked to Moscow's shadow fleet and military supply chains. Now, the measures come as G7 leaders meet in France, where support for Ukraine remains a key focus. Our correspondent Zainab Farzada reports.
Britain has announced a major new package of sanctions against Russia. The measures target Russia's so-called shadow fleet, a network of aging tankers used to transport oil and gas, and help Moscow bypass Western sanctions. More than 20 vessels have been sanctioned, along with shipping insurers and companies accused of supporting Russia's energy exports. The UK has also become the first G7 country to sanction several liquefied natural gas vessels linked to Russia's Arctic LNG-2 project is a key source of revenue for the Kremlin. Westminster says the latest measures are designed to weaken Russia's war economy and to limit its ability to fund the war in Ukraine. The sanctions also target a network linked to Russian military intelligence. British officials say a company known as Neptune has been involved in acquiring Western technology for Russia's military. 3 companies and 10 individuals connected to the network have been sanctioned. The package also targets suppliers in China, Thailand, and Turkey accused of providing military-related equipment to Russia, as well as financial networks used to evade existing sanctions. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that measures target the vessels, money, and individuals supporting Russia's war economy and threatening European security. The government says nearly 500 individuals, entities, and vessels have now been sanctioned under the UK's Russia regime in 2026 alone. The support for Ukraine expected to dominate discussions at the G7 summit. Jennifer Sata, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Turkey has warned Russia against taking any actions that could threaten its interests in the Black Sea. Now, the warning came at a Tuesday meeting in Moscow between Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. Our correspondent reports.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has warned Russia against any actions in the Black Sea that could threaten Turkey's security or national interests. After meeting Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, Fidan said Ankara expects all parties to avoid taking steps that could endanger regional stability or maritime safety. Fidan is in Moscow for a 2-day working visit, during which he is expected to hold additional talks with senior Russian officials. Fidan also reiterated Turkey's readiness to host future rounds of Russia-Ukraine peace negotiations, saying Ankara remains committed to diplomatic efforts aimed at ending the conflict. According to Turkish and Russian officials, the closed-door talks covered a range of issues, including Ukraine, Black Sea security, regional developments, and bilateral relations. The discussions come amid mounting concerns over the wider impact of the ongoing war on Black Sea countries, including Turkey. On Sunday, Turkish authorities found and destroyed a bomb-laden drone that washed ashore in Turkey's northern Bartın province. While officials have not formally identified the drone's origin, local reports have suggested it may have been linked to the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. As a NATO member that borders the Black Sea, Turkey has sought to maintain balanced relations with both Moscow and Kiev, while also protecting freedom of navigation and maritime security. The Fidan-Lavrov meeting serves to underscore Turkey's continued efforts to balance diplomacy with security concerns, as the consequences of the war continue to be felt across the wider region. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
The United Nations Security Council has unanimously voted to extend its mission in Afghanistan for another year. The extension allows the UN to continue its humanitarian, human rights and political work in the country. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis reports now from Kabul.
The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, known as UNAMA, will now remain in place for another year. All 15 members of the Security Council supported the resolution drafted by China during a meeting in New York on Monday. The extension allows UNAMA to continue coordinating humanitarian aid, monitoring human rights, engaging with the authorities here in Kabul, and reporting developments to the Security Council. The Council has also requested a strategic review of the mission. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is expected to present its findings by the end of March next year. The United States welcomed the planned review, but said the mission must become more streamlined and effective. Washington also called on the Taliban to fulfill counter-terrorism commitments, respect human rights, and release detained Americans. China's ambassador to the UN, Fu Song, said UNAMA continued to play an important role in coordinating international assistance and facilitating a dialogue. However, he warned that restrictions that prevent Afghan women who work for the UN from entering UN premises seriously affects the work of UN agencies. The Taliban has not yet publicly responded to the latest decision. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The The economic impact of the US-Iran peace agreement is under assessment. Pakistan says it could boost growth and ease energy market pressure, but it's too early to revise forecasts. Our correspondent Mariam Zia reports now from Islamabad.
As governments across the region assess the economic implications of the proposed US-Iran peace agreement, Pakistan says it sees a potential upturn in growth. Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb says it is too early to revise projections for the fiscal year 26-27 budget. On June 13, the national budget of Pakistan targeted 4% growth, with inflation at 8.2%, while keeping a $7 billion IMF program on track. The assessment of how the Middle East conflict impacted the country was that it pushed numbers back into double digits and disrupted supply chains through damage into regional energy infrastructure. Recovery, Aurangzeb says, will take time. The deal between US and Iran comes at a time when Pakistan is managing broader fiscal pressure. The government has increased defense spending by 18% to $10.7 billion, while seeking parliamentary approval for a third more in supplementary spending. For now, the government is holding off on changing its economic forecasts. Officials see the US-Iran agreement as reducing uncertainty around energy markets and trade flows. Whether that translates into stronger growth, however, will depend on how durable the deal proves to be and how quickly the regional supply chains recover. Mariam Zia, A News, Islamabad.
Georgia and Serbia are moving closer to signing a free trade agreement as Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić made his first ever presidential visit to Tbilisi.
Georgia and Serbia are nearing a free trade agreement. Both governments say only a few issues remain before the deal can be signed. The announcement came during a landmark visit by Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić to Tbilisi, the first time a Serbian head of state has visited Georgia. Speaking alongside Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze, Vučić said bilateral trade grew by 36.4% in the first quarter of the year. He added that growth in tourism and services has also picked up, helped by direct flights between the two countries. Kobakhidze said the trade agreement would benefit both economies and help deepen ties. The two leaders also discussed transport and logistics cooperation. Kobakhidze highlighted Georgia's role in the Middle Corridor, linking Europe and Asia. Serbia's decision to open an embassy in Tbilisi was described by both sides as a significant step, with Vučić saying that he hopes Georgia will open an embassy in Serbia as well. On European integration, Kobakhidze said the two countries share a common vision and face similar challenges and agreed that closer coordination and cooperation would be useful going forward. Vučić addressed Georgia's economic performance, citing first quarter growth of 9.3% and a 12% rise in construction. He thanked Georgia for its support on sovereignty and territorial integrity issues. During the visit, the Serbian leader also met with Georgian President Mihail Avalashvili and Catholicos Patriarch Shio III, the new head of the Georgian Orthodox Church. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Tashkent is hosting the 5th Tashkent International Investment Forum. Well, it brings together more than 8,000 participants from 100 countries, including global investors, business leaders, and representatives of major financial institutions.
This year's forum is the largest in its history, with participating companies holding a combined value of $42 trillion in assets. The focus this year is on investment opportunities in energy, critical minerals, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and finance. The investment forum has become one of Central Asia's leading investment platforms. Last year alone, it concluded with a record $30.5 billion worth of investment and trade agreements. One of the key events on the sidelines was the Uzbekistan-United States Business Forum. Officials say 193 American companies are participating this year, the largest U.S. business delegation ever represented at a bilateral economic event with Uzbekistan. Discussions focused on expanding cooperation in investment, technology, and job creation. Another notable session focused on Islamic finance and the growing role of Gulf capital in emerging economies. It comes just months after Uzbekistan adopted landmark legislation establishing a legal framework for Islamic banking and finance. The reforms allow banks to offer Sharia-compliant financial products and are expected to attract more than $1 billion in new investment. Experts say these changes could strengthen Uzbekistan's position as a future hub for Islamic finance in Central Asia. It could also open new financing opportunities for infrastructure and business development. The forum continues through June 18 with dozens of business meetings, investment presentations, and bilateral forums, expected to generate new partnerships and investment agreements for Uzbekistan's economy. It is Cyril Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A News.
Kazakhstan is betting big on artificial intelligence. Well, the government has signed a $10 billion agreement package with American tech companies Firebird and NVIDIA to build a major AI infrastructure hub. Our correspondent Fariza Kalamazina has more.
Kazakhstan has signed a $10 billion agreement package with US tech companies Firebird and NVIDIA to build what could become one of Central Asia's largest AI infrastructure hubs in the industrial city of Ekibastuz. The project will be developed in northeastern Kazakhstan, a region long associated with coal mining and power generation. But the authorities now want to turn it into a global computing hub using energy produced in the region to power large-scale artificial intelligence infrastructure. The plan is to build a data center valley powered by high-performance NVIDIA-based servers. The agreements were signed following talks between Kazakh officials and representatives of NVIDIA and Firebird. Under the deal, Kazakhstan will fully finance construction and infrastructure, and Firebird will supply server equipment and help attract major global technology companies. The project will be implemented in two phases. The first is expected to use more than 100 megawatts of power, while total capacity is projected to reach at least 300 megawatts, with potential expansion to 1 gigawatt.
It all starts with energy. If you don't have energy, then you can't do the rest of it. That is the foundation, and that is your ceiling. You can't go past the amount of development that you would like to if you don't have more energy. Kazakhstan is blessed with energy. Because you have abundant energy and you can produce more, you are a great place to start. Actually, Kazakhstan can participate at every layer of this 5-layer cake.
Officials say the goal is to turn electricity generated in Kazakhstan's coal region into exportable digital services, from AI computing power to global data processing for international companies. And according to government estimates, the project could generate at least $3 billion in annual export revenue, create new jobs, attract global tech players, and strengthen Kazakhstan's ambitions to become one of Eurasia's leading digital hubs. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
After the break, more top stories of the day. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Azerbaijan has been elected to the UN Human Rights Committee for the 2027 to 2030 term. Well, the vote took place in New York during the 42nd meeting of the state's parties to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Azerbaijan's candidate Fuad Zarbiev won election in the first round with the support of 131 states. Candidates from 16 countries competed for 9 seats on the committee, which monitors implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Relations between Azerbaijan and France have once again come under scrutiny. A parliamentary commission in Baku has issued a statement outlining what it describes as a range of hybrid threats directed against the country. Well, the allegations touch on diplomacy, media coverage and regional security issues.
A temporary commission of Azerbaijan's National Assembly on foreign interference and hybrid threats has issued a statement alleging that France continues to engage in activities directed against Azerbaijan. The commission said its monitoring and analysis indicate that actions it describes as hybrid threats have continued in a number of areas. According to the statement, such activities have become more pronounced since Azerbaijan's victory in the 2022 Karabakh War. The statement cites resolutions adopted by the French Parliament on Azerbaijan, initiatives raised in international organizations, coverage of Azerbaijan in French media, and the activities of Armenian diaspora groups as examples of what it characterizes as hybrid pressure. The Commission also accused France of contributing to regional tensions through arms deliveries to Armenia and its support for the European Union mission in Armenia. According to the statement, these actions are aimed at influencing Azerbaijan's international standing, domestic stability, and the ongoing peace process in the South Caucasus. In its concluding remarks, the Commission addressed the French public directly, stating that Azerbaijan remains committed to relations with France based on mutual respect and cooperation. French authorities have not yet publicly responded to the allegations contained in the statement.
Turning to Gaza now, where at least 4 Palestinians were killed in Israeli strikes on Monday. One woman was killed in the town of Zaweda, another person in a refugee camp, and 2 people, a medic and his son, died in a strike on Gaza City. The Israeli military reported it killed 2 Hamas militants in separate attacks, citing planned operations against Israeli troops. Meanwhile, mediators have prepared for further ceasefire talks in Cairo to advance a US-brokered peace plan. Ukraine and Russia have exchanged fresh long-range strikes as fighting continues despite renewed diplomatic efforts to end the war.
Ukraine and Russia have exchanged fresh long-range attacks as fighting continues despite renewed diplomatic efforts to end the war. Russia's defense ministry said it destroyed 172 Ukrainian drones overnight into Tuesday across multiple regions, including around Moscow, the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov, and Russian-annexed Crimea. In southern Russia's Krasnodar region, authorities said drone debris caused a fire at an oil depot near Crimea. No casualties were reported. Meanwhile, on Monday, Russia launched a major overnight missile and drone attack on Ukraine. In Kyiv, at least 5 people were killed and dozens injured. The strikes also damaged the Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra Monastery, a UNESCO World Heritage Site founded nearly 1,000 years ago. It is seen as one of Ukraine's most important religious landmarks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the monastery and described the attack as a blow to Ukraine's history and culture. Russia denied targeting the site and said it had been damaged by a Ukrainian air defense missile. Ukrainian security officials said debris recovered at the scene indicated a Russian drone. In Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv, a strike killed 5 emergency responders who had arrived to handle an earlier attack. Ukrainian officials said the rescuers were struck while responding to a fire at what they described as a civilian packaging facility. The exchanges came as leaders gathered for the G7 summit in France. Zelensky, who is due to attend the summit, said he had recently spoken with US President Donald Trump and offered direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump said he believed both leaders were open to discussions on ending the war, although any breakthrough has yet to happen.
A US Air Force B-52 bomber crashed shortly after takeoff in California, killing all 8 people on board. Well, an investigation is underway, but officials say it could be months before the cause is known. Here's more.
A US Air Force B-52 Stratofortress bomber crashed Monday shortly after takeoff from Edwards Air Force Base in California's Mojave Desert, killing all 8 people on board. The crew included a mix of military personnel, government civilians and defence contractors. The 8-engine bomber was conducting a routine test flight in support of a radar modernisation program when it went down moments after departure, bursting into flames and sending a massive plume of black smoke into the sky. Speaking at a news briefing, Colonel James Hayes, Deputy Commander of the 412th Test Wing, said first responders moved quickly to secure the crash site and begin firefighting efforts.
It was a B-52 that was on initial takeoff, supporting the radar modernization program, which is it was a local test sortie. It took off and immediately after takeoff crashed and burst into flames. Our team of first responders snapped into action and immediately cordoned off the area and took the appropriate action to start putting out the flames. While that was taking place, our base responded in kind to establish an emergency operations center and a wing operations center to ensure that the command and control of all base agencies and the response for the recovery effort was underway.
Hayes said a formal military investigation is now underway, but findings are not expected to be released publicly for approximately 6 months. The B-52 Stratofortress is one of the oldest aircraft still in service with the US Air Force, having entered service in 1955. Designed as a long-range heavy bomber, it can carry up to 70,000 pounds of conventional and nuclear munitions. The aircraft has played a key role in numerous military operations over the decades and remains a central component of America's strategic bomber fleet.
The reopening of the Strait of Hormuz may not be enough to restore balance to global oil markets. A new report warns disruption to energy supplies could linger, with Europe among the regions most at risk.
A new report by Bruegel says imbalance in the global oil market is expected to continue through 2027, despite any reopening of the key shipping route. The European think tank says the US-Israeli war against Iran has severely disrupted the Strait of Hormuz, triggering what it describes as the largest energy supply shock in history. In 2025, around 15 million barrels of crude oil and 5 million barrels of petroleum products passed through the strait each day, roughly 1/5 of global supply. Since shipping was disrupted, the International Energy Agency estimates a daily shortfall of 12.8 million barrels, the largest supply gap on record. Concerns over Europe's jet fuel supplies are also mounting. Goldman Sachs and S&P Global have warned of difficult summer supply prospects, while inventories have already shrunk significantly. Even if the strait reopens soon, the report says restarting oil fields and redeploying tankers could take months, extending market disruption well into 2027. It also warns that Europe's reliance on imported oil, with the European Union importing 97% of its crude, could become a long-term vulnerability.
Muslims in Saudi Arabia marked the Islamic New Year on Monday as a new kiswa, the black cloth covering the Kaaba, was placed over Islam's holiest site in Mecca. Well, the covering is made from embroidered silk panels decorated with Quranic inscriptions. The Kaaba is the focal point of the annual Hajj pilgrimage, during which millions of Muslims travel to Mecca and walk around the sacred structure as they're part of their religious duties. Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam and is required once in a lifetime for Muslims who are physically and financially able. As Kenya hosts a major oceans conference in Mombasa, coastal fishing communities are turning to digital catch records to monitor falling fish stocks as they try to balance immediate income needs with longer-term efforts to protect marine resources.
In Kwale and Kilifi counties, beach management units, supported by Coastal and Marine Resource Development, have been recording fish landings since 2022. 12 BMUs now collect data 4 days a week, reaching more than 1,000 fishers. At landing sites near Mombasa, officials log catches on mobile phones as fishers return from sea, weighing octopus and other species before entering the figures into a shared system. The data is then discussed in regular community meetings.
Through that data, we were able to develop a management plan to protect that octopus reserve. It showed us that there are small octopuses in those rocks again. So if the BMU closes that area for 3 months, fishermen will return and find well-grown octopuses. And when they sell them, they can earn better income for their livelihoods. Data has helped us see that illegal fishing can be reduced. When collecting data, BMU data collectors explain that fishermen using spear guns, which is illegal fishing, cannot properly catch fish. So the data collectors have helped us, and in our meetings we also encourage fishermen not to use illegal fishing gear.
Coastal and Marine Resource Development says the approach is shifting decision-making towards local communities, though tensions remain between conservation goals and daily survival needs. Quarterly feedback meetings have become forums where those competing pressures are debated. The developments come as Kenya hosts the 11th Our Ocean Conference in Mombasa from June 16th to 18th, the first time an African country has held the global gathering. The event carries the theme Our Ocean, Our Heritage, Our Future. The conference comes as global efforts to protect 30% of the world's oceans by 2030 remain off track, with concerns that many commitments are still not being implemented.
Well, that brings us to the end of Primetime tonight. Please do join us again tomorrow for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.